I'm Skipper Chung Warson, and this is the second season of the How This Works show. Me? I'm actually future Skipper. I'm re-recording the intro to say that we had a technical hiccup with Drew's video quality right around 36 minutes in, but it doesn't impact our discussion other than the visuals. So, let's get back to the show. Have you ever wondered how people become good at what they do? That's what the focus of this show is. I dive into their journeys, how they began, where they are today, and the insights that they've gained along the way. Today, I have Drew Burdick with me. He has over 15 years of experience in the areas of strategy, innovation, and design, building products and services through the lens of customer experience. He founded and runs StealthX. Drew, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
So we opened the show talking about our respective pronouns. Mine are he and him. What are yours?
Mine are he and him as well.
So if you wouldn't mind just briefly introducing yourself, I gave some of it away in the show's intro, but just take a few sentences and tell us a little bit more about you before we dive in a little deeper.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm the managing partner at StealthX, a agency or consultancy that I launched 6 months ago.
Okay.
Prior to that, I was a partner at a firm called Slalom, and I was leading the experience strategy design practice there. So I had about 30 folks reporting into me, combination of strategists, researchers, and designers. And we worked primarily with Fortune 500s, but also some mid-sized companies on designing and building digital products, as well as helping them with service design and customer experience, customer strategy, those kinds of things.
Got it.
Yeah, that's a little bit about me. I've also had an agency in my past life. I worked at a company called Red Ventures. I've worked at a company called AIG. So I've kind of worked in a lot of different industries and a lot of different sizes and shapes of companies. And excited to get back to entrepreneurship this year. It's been a fun road so far.
Yeah. So Drew, before we leave the opening sequence of questions, what's something that's unexpected or a surprising detail about yourself that you'd be comfortable sharing?
Yeah, I've got two. So one is I grew up overseas in the Philippines from 4 to 18, which is a bit unusual. And then in my earlier career, I started a clothing brand around electronic music as kind of just a side hobby. And it turned into something that was much bigger than I expected. We were traveling around to festivals and concerts around the country, and we had 163 street team members. It was a lot of fun. I burned out pretty hardcore though. I was working crazy hours and it was ultimately what kind of caused me to say, I think I need to go work a job, like a regular job for a little while. And anyway.
Yeah. Interesting. I wonder how that plays into your experience of music today, like how you experience music after that.
So a little bit more backstory. In college, I was big in electronic music. So we would actually throw like raves and stuff in our apartments, and we'd have like 75 people jammed into this tiny little space. And one of my buddies was a DJ, and so we would have these events. And music is just something that I'm super passionate about, and the design as well. And so I created this company as that intersection. After kind of moving on and working in corporate for a period of time, music continues to be something that inspires me, something that I'm really passionate about. I listen to music all the time. Yeah. I have a lot of friends who are in music. And then, I actually come from a pretty musical family. Both my parents, my dad has a bachelor's in music education, and my parents met in marching band. And so, and my brother can play many instruments by ear. So, anyway, music's deeply part of kind of who I am.
So let's take a left turn and let's talk a little bit about how you got interested in design, from music to design. How did you get started? What was the germ of that? What was the beginning of that for you?
Yeah, so I went to a liberal arts college and I double majored in political science communication. So literally nothing to do with what I'm doing now. At one point, I thought I was big into Che Guevara, and I thought I was big into Latin American politics. So I thought I was going to do something in the kind of political landscape. And my final year of college, I met a guy who had an agency.
Okay.
And I was interning for this organization, and he was on their board, and he was like, "Hey, you're kind of a creative guy. Have you ever thought about being a designer?" And in high school, I was big into art. So my art teacher kind of mentioned to me, like, hey, design you're not a great artist. You're like a B artist, but you might be a decent designer. And I was like, oh, okay. So
it's like a veiled compliment. Was that even a compliment?
I know. It's like, okay, thank you, I guess. I don't know. So this guy who kind of offered me this, he's like, hey, I've got this internship you could do for my agency. I'll teach you the ropes, whatever. And so I joined, and it was like, I don't know, love at first sight. Like he gave me a bootleg copy of Photoshop and Illustrator. It was like CS2, and I was like, man, this is awesome. How have I never done this? And so I pretty much from that point on, I was like, I want my career to be in the design universe in some form or fashion. So I started more in the graphic design kind of creative agency type world, and I was freelancing. So I graduated 2009. When I graduated, the economy was terrible. There were no jobs available. Right. And I was just like doing whatever I could to pay the bills. I was valet at the Ritz Carlton for a bit. I was I was washing windows as a side job. I was doing this like concrete curbing company.
Okay.
And all the while I was like freelancing. I was just whatever projects I could get. I was doing logos. I was doing flyers, business cards.
Sure.
And in parallel, I was doing the clothing line as just kind of like a fun little creative outlet. And both of them started to take off at around the same time. This was around 2010 or so. And so I had clients that I was starting to bring in as a freelancer. And then I was going out and selling the t-shirts and hats and things that I was designing. And yeah, so that's kind of how it all sort of started. And it was from there, I started to have more and more work, too much work. So I started to hire people to help me, and we had a small agency, and we're mostly working with kind of small, medium-sized companies in the Southeast.
Okay.
But yeah, and then just kept kind of growing. And it evolved over time from graphic design, creative, design to digital, like we were designing websites and things like that, and then moved into UX and product, and then kind of eventually led into more like I'd say like higher level innovation, customer strategy, service design, thinking at more of that macro level.
Yeah.
But it all kind of began with a bootleg copy of Photoshop, basically.
It all starts with a bootleg copy of Photoshop, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
So it sounds like and we've chatted before. We had a pre-conversation before recording this, and then you and I have chatted on a couple of different occasions. But it sounds like StealthX, your business, also encompasses a lot of these same areas as well.
Yeah, we so for a bit of context, StealthX, we do customer strategy, product design, and software engineering. And the thesis behind it is, I think the world is changing so rapidly with AI, and a lot of these bigger companies just, frankly, can't move fast enough to be able to meet the needs of companies, like in the design universe.
Sure.
And so earlier this year was like, okay, I think it's time for me to move on, and goes, I want to be at the forefront of the tidal wave. And I think a team of, 5 can punch harder than a team of 55 now.
Sure.
Because of all the capabilities that are available. So anyway, that's part of why I left. And now we're working with mostly mid-market companies, helping them enhance their customer and user experience. And it's a combination of some clients were doing more strategic type work, like, helping them think through their vision and their strategy. And then others were actually doing more, executing on product design. So we're like helping them redesign. Right now we're working with a company. We're helping them redesign some enterprise software. And we've done the user research before. We're doing usability testing, those kinds of things. And we built an e-commerce experience for a manufacturing company. So we've done a lot of different types of things, but it's been a blast. And really the way that we're approaching it is scrappy. And to kind of bring it back to my story, I've been a very scrappy person, kind of just figure it out, kind of, the story arc of my life. There's very unorthodox, doesn't really fit any kind of like typical mold. And so I've infused that into how we work and how we operate, and really, try to focus on how do we create value, and, how do we be scrappy and have a kind of figure it out mindset. Yeah.
Yeah. So lest we get too caught up in jargon, because there's lots of jargon out there in the world. We've talked about, user experience. We've talked about product design. We've talked about service design. Lots of different terms are flying around. But the core of your business is really focused on this notion of customer experience. Can you break that apart for me a little bit, and why that's so important in your eyes and in your clients' eyes?
Yeah, for sure. I think the simplest way to put it is, as things continue to, I call it like become the sea of sameness, right? Like everybody is like fast, easy, and cheap is the status quo now,
Sure.
right? And I think as you look forward to the next 5, 10 plus years, the businesses and the brands that are going to win in the market are the ones that have differentiated customer experience, meaning that they've intentionally designed both the digital things and the physical things in a way that makes customers, it's like the surprise and delight, this like, wow, this is so unique. How did they know? Like those kinds of moments.
Sure.
And that's really what we try and aspire to create, is those moments, those magical moments for customers, where, it engages them in a different way, creates brand loyalty, creates trust, and ultimately from a business standpoint, it drives customer lifetime value, revenue, et cetera. So that's kind of the reason, to your point, there's a lot of buzzwords and jargon, but that's really kind of at the heart of what we're trying to achieve, is helping businesses surprise and delight their customers.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think especially in this day and age where there's so many metrics and frameworks and approaches to work, this notion of what is the one thing that we can focus on? And for most businesses, it's around who's going to buy this product or service.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. I mean, I think it's easy. A lot of businesses get caught up in the efficiency, especially right now, 2024.
Right.
There's a lot of emphasis on like efficiency, streamlining, optimizing, improving. But like that's only going to get you so far, I believe. Like you're gonna run into a wall at some point where everybody's doing that. Everybody's like I said, fast, easy, and cheap. And so you have to think about, how do you elevate the experience? How do you create something that's different and creates additional value or differentiated value? And there's a lot of like ways to solve that problem.
Right.
Like strip away all the jargon. It's basically just like, who are the humans at the middle of it? What do they need and care about? And what are the things you need to change to create that for them?
Yeah, I just talked to Andy Pillane as the one of the last episodes, and he really boiled it down in a way that I hadn't heard it done quite as succinctly. But this notion of all businesses have a couple of different motives, or a few different motives, and the motives involve making money, saving time, and mitigating risk, right? Which is also in his mind like a stand-in for saving or making money. So I think by being really tactical and focused on, well, what is the point of this business, this feature that we're building? How does it either win hearts and minds of customers, or build more revenue, or whatever it is that it's meant to do? How do we focus in on that outcome that we want to accomplish?
Yeah. I think it's also easy for design folks like you and I to forget that. That at the end of the day, our job is to help businesses make or save money, right? And I think there's been a bit of we've kind of gotten distracted. It's like we've done a lot of navel gazing as an industry. We've done a lot of like, problem. We admire the problem too much, and we kind of forget like, hey, the reason why we're here is to help these organizations make money or save money. And I think the opportunity is, as a part of that, how we infuse human-centered thinking and into the work, and how do we bring that into the business where we are making things more inclusive, more accessible, making it better for people, considering um, the edge cases and the pain that we may be creating unintentionally. And I think that's part of our role. But I think we have to still remember, like, ultimately the reason why we have jobs is to help businesses make and save money. And I think other functions implicitly understand that and know that. And I think the
Right.
design industry, we've kind of lost the script a little bit on that piece.
Yeah. Well, and I don't mean to take us too far off of it into a sidebar, but I feel like there's something that's happened in the last, let's just time block it to the last 10 years and say that design has now become much more entrenched with this notion of business, like business outcomes, like how can we align to business goals? How can we be much more accountable for the things that we do, not just, oh, this looks better, right? Just the aesthetic side of it, but how does it perform? What is the improvement? What is the new feature or the substantive matter of it? And I think by falling into the business side of things, now it's become far more serious. And so I actually want to switch from talking about customer experience broadly and flip into your business at StealthX. How have you thought about customer experience, not just for your clients, but through the lens of building StealthX? Like, how does that customer experience layer look like for you?
That's a great question. So one of the things we've been working on is how the process of working with us
Mm,
is a great experience for our clients. So there's kind of this, like, we're helping our clients design better experiences for their customers, but we're also trying to design a great experience of working with StealthX.
yeah.
And so that looks a lot of different ways, but some of the ways that we think about is, like, we'll hold special events where we'll
Mm,
invite our clients to these kind of unique events, where we're focusing on community and connection. Other things that we'll do is big on giving gifts.
mm,
Obviously, there's some, like, especially publicly traded companies, you get the, like, giving too much or whatever. Like, there's, like, the think policies around that, but, like, anti-corruption bribery laws or whatever. But
sure.
giving special, thoughtful, personalized gifts, right? Also thinking through the client journey of, from the moment they kind of first interact with us to, the end of a project. What are the different moments in that journey, and how do we make sure that it's easy to work with us? It's clear, like, they know kind of what to expect, and we're showing up in a more thoughtful way than just executing as a vendor, which a lot of, I think, vendors, that's how they approach it. It's just like,
Sure.
we have a statement of work, we did the work,
Right.
thank you
Right.
for your money, and we walk away, right?
Right.
And so we're trying to be much more thoughtful about that. So yeah, anyway, that's kind of one of the things. And then, there's a lot of we have a lot of ideas for next year in terms of how we want to continue to expand on that idea. I've actually been working with a client recently. They're a B2B company, and we've been architecting kind of their client journey.
Okay.
And it's really fascinating because we've been talking about a lot of these really, like, unique experiences that you can provide to their client, that will have those, like, surprise and delight moments. It establishes the brand in their mind as, like, something different than just a vendor, but more a true trusted partner and advisor.
Sure.
So some of those, like, conversations I've been having with them is triggering ideas for us and, like, how we can help better serve clients. So.
Yeah. Well, there's also that notion of working on the business versus working in the business. And it's
Yeah.
interesting that you're talking about this B2B client and how that your work with them is actually informing your own. So it's like you're using that work together as a kind of qualitative research.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah. The design industry is evolving rapidly, with the notion of AI, how product intersects with marketing and customer experience. What sort of shifts are you foreseeing, like, on the horizon? We're recording at the end of December. But like, what are the things you see sort of coming up?
Yeah. It's funny. I had a podcast recently on this kind of topic, and one of the things that I feel pretty strongly about is, you look at the market. There's a lot of layoffs, a lot of
Yeah.
like cuts. The market is, full of folks who are trying to find their next gig,
Yeah.
and I think it signals to this notion that maybe like the golden age of large design organizations plodding along in kind of an agile
Agile-ish,
way,
right?
yeah, is maybe on its way out.
Mm,
I think you're going to start to see, is my opinion. I think you're going to start to see a lot more small teams that are delivering at like faster and sort of like higher capacity,
mm,
and higher velocity. And I think you're also going to see like this. There's this interesting thing happening right now where it's like this network of freelancers and fractional folks,
yeah.
which is right how we met. Like
Yeah.
you've got people who they've either been laid off or quit, and now
Yep.
they're kind of putting out their own shingle and they're operating as an independent contractor, consultant, freelancer, whatever. You're starting to see this kind of network effect where you can get the best of the best of like
Yeah.
all these different skills and abilities
Yeah.
that you can bring together to create like a team of Avengers that can deliver even more, value than if you build your own in-house team. And so I think obviously like the design, there's a lot of folks that I talk to about this and they get like really uncomfortable with that idea because they're like,
Mm,
well, but how am I going to get paid? And I'm not going to benefits. I'm not going to have a salary.
sure.
And I think it's if you've ever read the book, Who Moved My Cheese, it's a classic business book. Great allegory in there. It talks about, two people and two mice, and every day they go in to find the cheese. And one day the cheese disappears, and they had like people had like set up homes and
Right.
whatever. And the mice, the names were Sniff and Scurry and Hem and Haw. So the Sniff and Scurry like had already kind of seen the writing on the wall, and so they went back out in the maze to go find more cheese. But people were like hemming and hawing, like, oh, how dare the cheese be moved? And I think that as designers, I want to be the Sniff and the Scurry in the story,
Right.
and like not kind of like slam my fist on the table and demand that things go back to the way they were. It's like, this is where we are, And so, yeah, I think people are gonna have to adjust to not having the sort of like safety net of a large organization
Yeah.
that you're, and massive teams you can just hide in and like chip away at like one feature for years, right? I think you're gonna have to deliver more value, and you're gonna have to do it more efficiently and more nimbly than ever before.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. And the notion of change is hard, whether that change is foisted upon you or it comes to you, right? And there's all sorts of categories of change: big change, little change. I know a variety of people who've been part of reduction in forces, over the course of the year. Some people have been out of work for months, if not years. And I think it's just a really hard place right now to have, especially those folks who have come out of boot camps and some of those really formulated frameworks of learning, of saying, well, I've done all this work, I have all these examples that are sort of textbook perfect, but they're not real work examples. So
Yep.
I think it's challenging to have so many sort of a supply demand. It's not a problem, and I don't mean to reduce people to sort of dots and just like a bucket of people, but I do think there's a challenge right now around how best to utilize designers who may not have a full skill set or an articulated skill set.
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny, I wrote on the boot camp thing recently about like, I think it's a bad investment. I think the folks that are starting to get into boot camps now, I'd be like, I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Like the boot camp training is already behind. It's kind of like, honestly, if you go to college and you're learning about digital product design, except for a few programs, like you're probably learning things that are already 5 years out of date,
Sure.
right? And that's just because of academia can't create the curriculums fast enough to keep up with the pace. But yeah, I think that especially folks who are more early career, junior, who are trying to build the experience and the muscle to be able to go, be more at a senior or lead role.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard. And I think that's where the recommendation, the guidance I've been giving for folks who've kind of approached me and said, hey, can you mentor me? Can you help me? The thing I've been recommending is I'm like, look, like you're going to have to find ways to differentiate yourself.
Right.
And that's probably going to mean that other things like adjacent skills you're going to have to learn. And also I think there's a world where designers are going to have to start to learn more about their industry.
Yeah.
Right. Like really get deep on an industry and become like, an authority on UX design for manufacturing companies,
Sure.
of this size and scale, and you understand supply chain, and you understand logistics, and you understand all the nuance, right? Like I think those are the kinds of things that people are going to have to think about, which is a little bit different, right? I think most of us who come up in design, we've been fairly industry agnostic, or we haven't been like as focused on like I want to deeply understand this industry, and we're more like I want to deeply understand this discipline.
Sure.
And I think it might flip a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Because business leaders who are looking to bring on design folks, I think they will value more a design person who has the ability to deliver and understands the business implicitly, and it's not like having to learn like what in the insurance industry, what is an underwriter, and you're like, okay, this isn't like we need you to understand like the underwriting process so you can design a new underwriting platform, right? And be able to like more deeply understand the needs and the nuance. Anyway.
Yeah. So in our pre-conversation, we talked about, I think you had just done Product Camp and some other community initiatives around the Charlotte, North Carolina area. And you talked earlier about how in some of your areas of work, it's been focused on the sort of like the Southeast region of the United States. I wonder how you see this regional focus, but not to say you're only limited to that part of the country. How this regional focus and collaboration might foster design and the way that entrepreneurism shows up in different places?
Yeah. So I think this is kind of like raw thoughts, but I've been actually thinking about this recently. So you're getting my early formation or whatever. But I think if you look at COVID, everybody got comfortable with like remote work and virtual work, and I think there's this epidemic of loneliness right now, right? Where people they miss being around other human beings. And if you think about it, you're working at home, you're by yourself, especially if you're working independently, you just like long for human interaction.
Sure.
And so we've really doubled down on, focusing deeply on North Carolina because it's where we live and it's where we are, and like creating relationships, building on the relationships we have and building new relationships, but also being at the nexus of the community, right? I think there's in business, a competitive advantage you have is like the proximity. Like if you're close to someone else,
sure,
you have an advantage over other people who are on the other side of the planet or whatever.
Yeah.
Because you can just like last night I went to this event. It was like 200 people called Founders and Funders event, and it was a lot of Charlotte-based entrepreneurs, investors, etc. Founders, and I bumped into like 12 people that I know, and I met several more folks, and those relationships lead to opportunities. They lead to collaboration, and so I think the proximity thing is important, and I think it's going to become even more important as the world becomes more like fragmented and virtual. I think people are going to long for those human moments.
Yeah. Plus one to that, because humans are social animals. This notion that we can do everything on a screen, and we can. It's possible. You and I are having this conversation on a video call, but I think there's something much more impactful about how you can show up in person in addition to these sort of virtual touch points as well.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this idea that like like with AI, and AI is consuming everything, and it's everybody's afraid. The thing that AI can't take is soul, right? It's
Right.
like the human quality of the work and the interaction, and I think that's really where, as we go, we look forward to the future of work, it's going to become more and more important to build the relationships, to be human, to lean into those, moments where you're having lunch with somebody or you're having a coffee or, things like that. Like, I think that's where we've really invested a lot of time and energy is cultivating community and connection,
Yeah.
because I feel like that's really going to be a competitive advantage over the long term. And also, just I like people and I like talking to people, so it's always fun to meet interesting people, hear their stories, learn from them, learn what makes them tick, and the combination of meeting all these different people, you learn a lot, and it introduces you to ideas you never would have learned otherwise.
Yeah. So we've gone through a number of topics, some of which we had sort of pre-talked about, some of which we talked about before, and some of which have just come up in conversation. Is there something that we haven't covered yet? Something specific that you'd want to get into?
Um, I think the only one that is like in my head is bouncing around, and maybe this is like a question to you,
Mm.
is um, like there was a recent conference from Lenny. There was like Lenny and Friends,
Oh, Lenny Rachitsky.
and
Yep.
yeah, Lenny Rachitsky did it, and I think there's like a good amount of people went, and they were
Ton of
talking about
people
the
went.
future. Yeah, it was. I was actually very surprising. Like I saw the pictures of something, like, wow, okay, that's cool. Like I did not expect that to be as big as it was, but just shows the pent up demand for human relations interaction, right?
Plus one.
Um, but anyway, one of the topics that came out of that and has been kind of explored, over the last month or two since that event, was this notion that like product is dead. And
Mm.
there's a lot of folks I've been talking to have shared that they're in SaaS companies that are trying to move into services,
Sure.
and or they have products and they're trying to figure out how to move out of it so that they're not commoditized. And I'm
Sure.
just curious, like, what your take is on the commoditization of product, commoditization of design,
Yeah.
and like the shift to services.
Yeah. I think there's a lot underneath there, but I think this notion of moving towards how, as you said, the commoditization of product design, even development, right? If we're talking about what has been talked about as that three-legged stool of product design, uh, I think that all of these things have been declared dead at some point, right? Development is dead. We don't need to. We can use AI to code everything now. And I think I saw a statistic that well over 50% of all the code on GitHub is now somehow AI generated, or AI validated, or whatever it is. I don't know exactly how they can tell. And I would say the same thing for design, right? We've seen a plethora of design systems that have come out, and this notion of if you just follow the pattern, then, and this idea that everything looks the same, right? So much uniformity in so many different kinds of products. And then I would say the same thing for product as well, that these practices and these frameworks, and these processes that are followed, if you're staying in your lane, and the example that you cited before around a designer waiting for the requirements or the brief, or whatever it is that gets pitched over the fence, and if you say, here, make this, and you're only doing that one thing, you're not asking the deeper questions, you're not functioning as a human designer, as a human product person, as a human developer, whatever your title is, unless you're digging underneath and asking why, and maybe even pulling some more information and context out of your coworkers, and even better, pull it out of your customers or users and say, why are we working on this thing? Ask those questions that can blow some of this stuff open, and then figure out ways to move forward. Like, that's stuff that I don't think any of the AI tools can do, at least not yet.
Yeah, so can't agree more, man. I feel like all three legs of the stool are in a state of disruption,
+1.
and I think it's going to be really interesting to see how teams evolve. Like I kind of did the agile bunny ears a little bit ago.
Sure.
Like it'll be interesting to see how that evolves. Like I met with a product leader yesterday, and we were talking about, frankly, like a lot of product owners, product managers effectively have been sort of tactical, sort of like execution type people. They're writing requirements, they're creating user stories,
Sure.
they're managing a backlog, whatever. And you're like, really, AI can do all of that,
Exactly.
right? Like you become more of this facilitator. And like, I was telling her, I'm like, you could have, Otter
Yep.
or some meeting recording and it capture all the data, take that transcript, get GPT to like break it into like a table with all the requirements and things that were described, put it import into Jira, and you're good.
Yeah.
And now you just, instead of spending like 2 weeks on writing requirements and creating user stories,
Sure.
it's just done. So it's like, now what are you going to do with that time
Right.
to create value, right? And similarly, whether we like it or not, Figma is now learning, like the model is learning from the designs that we're creating. We all opt into it by using their platform.
Yep.
So we're only a half step away from all the design systems that we've built and the patterns that we've created. AI will start to generate interface. So it's like, all right, what are we going to do? Like if it's that much faster for us to create interface,
right,
to your point, like the things that we should be thinking about are like, why?
Right.
Like, why are we doing this? Where can we create more value? What are customers really struggling with? Like it's the nuance that I think we're going to have to really become experts at.
Yeah.
Like that AI, to your point, yet hasn't been able to crack that nut. And so, it'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah. So let's get into our closing questions. And these are closing questions that we ask all of our guests. But Drew, what's a significant lesson it can be in your work or in your home life? Like what's something that you wish you would have learned earlier?
Yeah. So I have this tattoo on my arm, and it says "Do the next right thing." And in the middle of COVID, there was a lot of like stuff going on personally and professionally. It was hard time, right? I think hard for many people. And that quote was something that really helped my wife and I through like that process of realizing like we don't have to know what the future holds. We don't have to have all the answers. Just do the next right thing. And sometimes, especially with everything we just talked about, where the world's changing so quickly, there's a lot of like unknowns. Rather than getting afraid of like what could be or what might be, it's really saying, all right, let's just do the next right thing.
Yeah.
And then do the next right thing after that and after that. And so that's something that I wish that I had learned earlier on, because I think it would have saved me a lot of stress and anxiety if I had figured that out. And I tell everybody that. That's why I have it on my arm, because it's just such an important reminder that in the days that we live in, where things are confusing and potentially can be scary.
Yep.
Sometimes you just got to say, just put one foot in front of the other. I can't figure it all out right now.
Yeah.
So
what's one thing that you're reading or listening to or watching right now that you'd recommend to the listeners?
Yeah. This is not something that I should say it's something I've read multiple times and I continually go back to it. It's Daniel Coyle's Culture Code and Culture Playbook. Excellent books. And I've been referencing it a lot lately because I'm in the process of building a company, building a team. And it's a good reminder for me on what do I want the culture to be, right? Culture is I think, the kind of cumulative sum of your actions. Small actions build over time to become big ones. And so, I highly recommend it. Culture Playbook is great. It has like really practical, like things that you can do within a team to cultivate psychological safety and become a high performing team.
Nice. So let's say you have unexpectedly a day off and you have unlimited resources to do whatever you want in that day, but you only have the day. What do you do?
Take my family, go to the airport, see whatever the closest flight to anywhere is, and hop on the plane and go.
Nice.
And like we've actually talked about this quite a bit. Like a couple years ago, when there was a hurricane about to hit the East Coast, and my wife was like, "Hey, what if we just, because the house we were living in, if the power went out, the water would go out because our water pump would cut off." And so we had young kids at the time, and we're like, I don't really want to be in a house with no power, no water, with like a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old.
Sure.
So we just like booked a flight to the soonest flight out of town, and it was to San Antonio, and we ended up having a wonderful time. We like got to explore San Antonio, went to the Alamo,
Nice.
stayed in Airbnb. It was a really good experience. But ever since we did that, that's one of the things that we love, is just like get on a plane, go experience the food, the culture, and the people of that particular area. So
yeah, that's a great suggestion. Just be really improvisational about it. And I hope everything was okay with the hurricane at the time.
Yeah, it was good.
Okay.
It actually, funny enough, it ended up, I think it detoured into the Atlantic and didn't end up hitting the coast. So we flew to San Antonio for really no reason, but it was a good memory.
Nice.
So,
It's a great memory.
Yeah.
So do you have a prediction of something that will be true in a year?
I would say, at the rate that AI is moving, we will see more mass adoption of like solopreneurs building products, like designing, building, and launching products without a team of anybody. And I think it's going to start to cause the bigger companies to question, like, why do we have all these people
Sure.
when we could just use like Cursor and Replit and launch something now?
Yeah.
So I think there's probably going to be even more of an identity crisis for people in the three-legged stool, because
Right.
it's going to feel like, what do we do? What happens now?
Yeah.
And I think it's probably going to happen sooner than we would like. I think it's going to be probably in the next 12 months where it's already happening now.
Yeah.
It's just going to happen at an accelerated rate. I've been using the metaphor of, we're in like the 64 meg era of AI. Or actually, probably now we're in like the 256 meg era. So for those who don't remember, like
computers
used to have, like 64 megs of RAM.
Yep.
Now we're at like 32 gigs or
Right.
64 gigs or whatever, right? And so it got faster and faster as time went on, and that's, I think, what's going to happen with AI. So I would say, actually, if you are a designer or a developer or a product person, I would experiment like crazy. I would test all of these tools.
Yeah.
I would play, because I think the more that you're aware of what it's capable of, then it'll start to create ideas that you can kind of use to improve your workflow, improve your, quality of the work that you're doing. I think if you see it as like almost an augment, like if you're, if you're familiar with like Marvel, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, if you're Captain America, right, he gets like the shot and becomes a super soldier. Like that's kind of what it is.
Sure.
If you think about it that way, right? If you have that attitude of like, this is going to help me and I need to just look for ways to apply it. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah, the augmentation.
Yeah.
So Drew, where can people find out more about you, find out more about StealthX?
Yeah. So on social, you can look me up, Drew H. Burdick, pretty much every social platform. Also drewburdick.com. I also have a podcast, which little sort of plugs. Skipper will be on there here shortly. So catch part 2 of this conversation over there. But it's building great experiences on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And then StealthX, you can find us at stealthx.co.
Nice. Well, Drew, thanks a lot for your time. And as you said, there will be kind of a part 2 where we flip the tables and Drew will be asking me some questions. So tune in to Building Great Experiences.
Yeah. Thanks, Skipper.
Cool. And that's it for this episode of the How This Works show. We appreciate your support. Subscribe so you don't miss out. And until next time, remain ever curious, and we'll talk again soon.